Tonight on NewsWatch, Egyptian Christians under attack. The government now on the hot seat for not providing protection.
Plus, Republicans draw up battle plans for the new year. The top goal, overturning the president's health care law.
And an Alabama church embarks on a radical experiment. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Christians in Egypt are protesting and calling for protection. Good evening, I'm Lee Webb.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. Christians there have returned to the Coptic church in Alexandria, the site of a suicide bombing New Year's Eve. The attack killed nearly 24 worshipers. Now Egyptian Christians say they're fed up with the government's failure to protect them. Heather Sells has more in tonight's top story.
Egyptian authorities are trying to determine if homegrown Islamic radicals bombed a Christian church on New Year's, killing 21 worshipers and wounding nearly 100. They're also investigating whether al-Qaeda-backed outsiders, possibly from Iraq, sneaked into Egypt to commit or coordinate the bombing. Al-Qaeda terrorists and Muslim militants have killed almost 100 Iraqi Christians in the last 2 months. Some fear this is a horrible trend against Christians in parts of the Islamic world.
They have been targeted for extermination in places where they have been systematically oppressed for a long time.
Christian protesters took to the streets in 3 Egyptian cities Sunday. One cried out, "All these people murdered, what have they done?" They were just celebrating a new year, praying in a house of God. Much of the protesters' wrath was aimed at the police and government, who they say don't do enough to protect Egypt's Christian minority. Egypt's president blamed outside terrorists and spoke of Muslim-Christian unity.
Terrorists are not going to succeed in threatening Egypt and threatening the unity of the Muslims and Christians living side by side in Egypt.
Egypt's top Muslim cleric came together with the spiritual leader of the nation's Orthodox Coptic Christians to say all Egyptians of all religions need to stay united. The Pope weighed in as well, saying the attack in Egypt, just like those on Iraqi Christians, offends God and the whole of humanity.
We need to stand alongside our brothers and sisters around the globe that are fighting against this sort of violence.
Heather Sells, CBN News.
Paul Marshall joins us now from Washington for more on this story. Paul is with the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. And Paul, it seems like these protests by Christians in Egypt are spreading throughout that country. Where do you see this going? And do you see that they've gained more steam than other protests in the past?
I think they have. It's important to remember that the bombing in Alexandria, while it killed more people than anything in the last 10 years, and had a different style, still it's not unusual. There are violent attacks on Copts in Egypt almost every week of the year. And many Copts are getting fed up. 7 were massacred last Christmas Eve, machine gunned as they came out of a service. Security forces killed 3 Copts doing repairs on a church. So it's ongoing, and even the U.S. State Department now speaks in Egypt of a climate of impunity. That is, if someone attacks Copts, nothing's going to happen to them. There's impunity. The attacks are increasing, and the Copts feel that they're simply not being protected. They're just out there being killed.
And so you would disagree with Egyptian President Mubarak, who says this is an outside influence like al-Qaeda?
This one may be an outside influence. The style is different. Most of the attacks I mentioned, the Christmas Eve attack, this was a drive-by shooting. Those tend to be local thugs, not much organization. This one could well be an al-Qaeda attack. It seems to be better planned. It looks like a suicide attack. So there could really be an escalation. So I would agree that this could be a different source, that is al-Qaeda. But again, to emphasize that these attacks are going on year after year, month after month.
What's behind it, Paul, in your estimation?
There's increasing radical Islam in Egypt. It's a country I go to quite often. And every time you see the signs, more women in Egypt are covered. 15 years ago, if you saw a covered woman in Egypt, you'd think she was a foreigner. So, and there's the influence. A lot of Egyptian workers go and work in Saudi Arabia. They get radicalized. The Saudis pump money into Egypt and Islamic educational institutions. So across the board, an increase in more radical forms of Islam and increased intolerance and increased tension.
But it is a sober reminder for those of us in this country who worship with relative freedom to pray for those Christians who are being persecuted in places like Egypt. Paul Marshall with the Hudson Institute. Paul, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Lee.
Well, it's a new year and a new Congress in Washington. Republicans say they're ready to take on the huge federal deficit and government spending.
One of their top priorities will be getting rid of the new health care law. John Jessup has that story now from Washington.
This week, Congress gets a facelift, boasting more Republicans in both the House and Senate. When it comes to medical procedures, they're not so concerned about cosmetic surgery, but Republicans are itching to take a scalpel to remove last year's health care law.
You're going to see the fight on Obamacare across the board in the House and the Senate to try to defund the Obamacare bill and to start over.
With the GOP now in control of the House, Republicans who hold powerful chairmanships are vowing to act soon.
As part of our pledge, we said that we would bring up a vote to repeal health care early. That'll happen before the President's State of the Union address.
Even if it is passed in the House, the Senate is still controlled by Democrats. Plus, President Obama would veto legislation that attempts to repeal the law. But Republicans have another plan of attack if they don't get enough support for repeal. They will go after the law piece by piece. And it doesn't stop there. With majority control, House Republicans now have the power to issue subpoenas and summon government officials to testify on Capitol Hill.
The sooner the administration figures out that the enemy is the bureaucracy and the wasteful spending, not the other party, the better off we'll be.
Tea Party-backed candidates who promised to cut spending if elected are delivering on their campaign pledges. They say they'll vote against letting government borrow any more money, even if it means the possibility of a government shutdown.
I'm not going to write a blank check as far as raising the debt limit without us also saying we're going to do these things to make ourselves fiscally responsible.
Raising the debt ceiling to me is absolutely irresponsible. We've been spending money for so long that we don't have and keep saying, well, it's okay. We'll just raise taxes. We'll find it somewhere.
But the White House says that would be disastrous.
The impact on the economy would be catastrophic. I mean, that would be a worse financial and economic crisis than anything we saw in 2008. If we get to the point where you've damaged the full faith and credit of the United States, that would be the first default in history caused purely by insanity.
As a show of fiscal discipline, House Republicans drafted new rules that will require lawmakers to show just how they plan to pay for any bills that increase the deficit. There is one exception, though, and that's any legislation that would repeal the health care law. John Jessup, CBN News, Washington.
Joining us now to talk more about the new Congress is Seton Motley. He's the president of Less Government. Seton, the first order of business is to repeal the health care law. Do you think Republicans will succeed?
I think they very well succeed in the House. They certainly have the majority there, and you can get a lot of Democrats, too. Then it goes to the Senate. You've got 23 Democrats up for re-election in 2012. I'm sure you could pressure 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of those to get over the 50 vote minimum with the 47 Republicans. Then it becomes a question of, does Barack Obama veto? And I want to remind everybody that in '96, President Clinton twice vetoed welfare reform before he signed the identical bill. So I think the Republicans stick to their guns and keep putting it in front of him. I think at some point he may have to do something he doesn't really want to do.
All right. Now, Democrats were able to push through much of what the president wanted in the lame duck session. Will there be an attempt to undo any of that?
You know, there's so much to undo. I'm not sure you can get to all. I'm not sure you can get to all of it. But there will be an attempt. I think right now what they're going to focus on, and what I would focus on. I mean, some of the stuff you have to let go because there's just not enough time. But I would certainly first and foremost focus on health care repeal and spending reforms, fundamental restructuring of how Congress operates when it comes to writing budgets and spending money. So I think they're going to start there and then see how far along they get, and hopefully that'll be very far, and then they can move on to doing some of the other things. It's going to take a lot of oversight and a lot of years to undo what's been done in just the last 2.
See, the American people increasingly say they want less government. Do you think they really mean it? I mean, when something that benefits them is cut, will they hold to the smaller government ideology?
I think you'll see in the Takings Coalition people complaining about that money going away. But I think what you saw at the Tea Party is this has nothing to do with the Takings Coalition. Even if they're receiving one or more of the things they want to see cut, they still want to see it cut because they realize that we can't afford to continue to do what we've been doing for the last 60, 70 years any longer. So I think they're going to realize that the short-term really pain that they're going to suffer, and I think they're going to discover, and I think they know this, that it's not going to be as painful as they originally thought, will be worth it when it comes to long-term solidification of the American economic structure.
Okay, so the word to the American people is no pain, no gain.
Well, the word no pain, no gain, and there won't be much pain anyway, I think.
Now, what about gridlock? I mean, we had that victory. The Republicans had a bit of a victory, but are we going to see gridlock?
I think the Tea Party and the American people voted for gridlock. I think the number one reason they voted, the Tea Party voted the way they did was to stop Obama, Pelosi, and Reid, which they now, in large degree, have with this Republican majority in the House. So the only place gridlock seems to be a dirty word is inside the Beltway. Outside the Beltway, I think, you know, the government not working is one of the best things going.
Seat Motley, we'll have to leave it with there. Seat Motley is with less government. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Coming up, a country in chaos. Why the Ivory Coast is on the brink of civil war.
Hi, Anthony Sullivan here for ShaveMate. All-in-one razors, Titan for men, Diva for women. Simplify your shaving, simplify your life. ShaveMate razors combine 6 premium blades and thick, rich, real shaving cream right inside the handle. So you'll never have to deal with the mess of cans of shaving cream again. ShaveMate is the perfect shaving solution for home, the gym, a business trip, or vacation.
It's everything in this one little package. It's perfect.
You get a great shave every time. I think it's going to change the way everybody shaves.
Order right now, and I won't just double the value, I'll triple it, absolutely free. We'll even include our convenient shower hook. You get a total of 3 shave mates in your choice of Titan or Diva, and the shower hook, all for only $9.99. Here's how to order.
Order now. Call 1-800-655-8514 or go to shavemate.com. That's 1-800-655-8514 or go to shavemate.com.
If you have diabetes and you're on Medicare, call now for a new pain-free meter. These new meters are more accurate, they're easier to use, and the best news is you don't have to prick your fingers anymore. Call now, and Arriva Medical will send you one of these new meters for free. And if you have Medicare, your testing supplies may also be covered. Arriva makes it simple. They bill Medicare directly. There are no upfront costs, and they deliver your supplies right to your door for free. With these new meters, there's no coding, you don't have to prick your fingers, and some of these meters even talk.
Your blood glucose reading is 122.
And if you call 1-800-284-9762, we will send you a free Betty Crocker Diabetes Cookbook filled with delicious recipes.
Call Arriva today. You'd be glad you did.
A new blood test could transform the way many types of cancer are detected and treated. Johnson & Johnson is working with researchers on the test. It can spot a single cancer cell among 1 billion healthy ones. Doctors hope to use it to determine what treatment would be best for a particular tumor and quickly determine if the treatment is working.
Investigators are trying to unravel a mystery in a central Arkansas town. 2,000 red-winged blackbirds mysteriously fell dead from the sky this weekend. Scientists are trying to figure out why. One scientist says the birds showed physical trauma and speculated the flock could have been hit by lightning or high-altitude hail. But New Year's Eve revelers shooting off fireworks could have also startled the birds from their roost and caused them to die from stress.
It's a bizarre story. Australia's worst flooding in a decade is taking a heavy toll now on residents in the northeastern part of that country. Floodwaters now cover an area the size of France and Germany combined. At least 10 people have been killed. Military flights are rushing supplies to the coastal city of Rockhampton before floodwaters cut it off. There are also reports of looting in some of the evacuated areas. West African presidents are in Ivory Coast today, hoping to resolve the disputed presidential election there.
Two candidates, the incumbent Christian president and his Muslim opponent, have both taken the oath of office. Some fear the country is on the brink of civil war. Gary Lane brings us this report from the Ivory Coast.
United Nations peacekeepers stand guard outside Abidjan's Gulf Hotel. They're protecting Alassane Ouattara, the man the UN and many Western nations claim is the rightfully elected president of Ivory Coast. They say incumbent President Laurent Gbagbo must step down, but he refuses. Gbagbo and his supporters insist acts of election fraud and intimidation were committed at the polls by armed supporters of Ouattara. This painting, hanging on a wall at the headquarters of the Patriotic Youth Organization, expresses the sentiments of many Gbagbo supporters. Like Moses, President Gbagbo is leading his people across rough seas and into the Promised Land. One of his top men, Blé Goudet, sounds the charge by blowing the shofar. Goudet is the charismatic minister of youth, the one President Gbagbo depends on to rally those he calls young patriots. Goudet says reports that Gbagbo supporters plan to violently storm the Gulf Hotel are untrue.
Are you able to keep a lid on some maybe angry young people who may be upset at what is happening? Are you able to control them?
Yes, they are under control. I believe in the force of the nonviolence, and I think that by nonviolence we can win. They have the UN army. They have the France army, and we have Jesus with us because we have the truth.
And what do you think Jesus wants to see happen?
He wants peace to be settled. He wants the decision of the people of Côte d'Ivoire to be respected.
Goudet and Gbagbo supporters want an international investigation of election fraud. They say the results would validate the Ivorian Constitutional Commission's ruling that declared Gbagbo the winner. Gary Lane, CBN News, Abidjan, Ivory Coast.
Up next, the radical experiment that's transforming a church and a community.
The doctor came in. I was still waking up from anesthesia. He leaned over my bed and he said, "Laura, you have cancer." And he walked out of the room. The first thought is, what's going to happen to my children?
It's pretty rare for a person as young as me to get Hodgkin's disease. You would think, am I going to be here next year? Am I going to be able to spend more time with my family? And that was really hard.
The doctor says I would like to have his wife, his pastor, and his two best friends present. Then you know you're about to receive really bad news. There was very little hope given to us.
I just wanted this cancer out of me. I wanted to take care of it and move on.
We saw an ad on TV for Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And when I called them, I was very surprised that they were so quick to help us.
The second that we walked through the door, I knew that was the place that I wanted to be. If it wasn't for their kindness and giving, it would be unbearable to be able to go through something like that. And I honestly don't know how people who don't get that are able to handle it.
We were looking for medical care that would help us fight cancer, not manage it, but to actually fight it and beat it. And that's what we found.
Most people thought that that was a death sentence. I knew that I wanted to fight this. I knew I wasn't going to let that happen to me.
If you're a winner and you're a fighter and you're strong, you're going to stay that way. Your mental makeup, your attitude that you've taken your whole life with you, you're going to keep that attitude.
I said, let's just do it, and let me go on with my life.
Call now and we'll send you this free DVD that shows you how the most compassionate group of people anywhere puts you at the center of everything we do. Advanced medical treatment combined with unique supportive therapies give you treatment options you may not even know exist.
Cancer Treatment Centers of America is the way of the future. Patients are now taking control of their own healthcare destiny.
I truly wondered when he had cancer if I would ever get him back. Thanks to Cancer Treatment Centers of America, I have my husband back.
A megachurch in Alabama is attracting national attention for what it's calling the radical experiment.
As Mark Martin shows us, they're taking the Word of God to heart, shaking up their city and their world.
Birmingham, Alabama is in the middle of a radical experiment, spurred on by one of its churches.
the church at Brook Hills, and its pastor, Dr. David Platt.
And the prayer was, God, let me make a difference for you that is utterly disproportionate to who I am.
Platt says God put in his heart an overflow of personal conviction, an overflow that he shared with his congregation and through the book Radical, Taking Back Your Faith from the American Dream. The New York Times bestseller asks the question, do you believe that Jesus is worth abandoning everything for? From this pastor's inward look sprouted a church's outward focus on Birmingham and the world.
There's certainly nothing going on in this church that's attributed to my wisdom or my experience or competence or anything else. Any good thing here is attributable to His glory alone.
So the Church of Brook Hills began the radical experiment by going back to the Bible. The book of Acts describes the early church as selling their property and possessions to give to anyone in need. One of the experiment's main challenges involves sacrifice and setting a cap on your lifestyle. Families are encouraged to limit the amount they spend on themselves. Sacrificing for a set purpose for several people in the church has meant selling their affluent suburban homes and moving to inner city neighborhoods like this one. To them, it's a way to share the gospel and also to free up resources to bless others.
When we bought our house in the suburbs, we weren't thinking about our neighbors.
Ben and Kylie DeLoach and Paul and Jessica Ward say God led them to move to East Lake, a Birmingham neighborhood known for crime, drugs, and poverty.
We were not being intentional about where we lived as far as advancing the gospel goes. When we bought this house, we were, and that makes all the difference.
They're already seeing results.
If they call, we can be 5 minutes away instead of an hour away. So yes, we've been able to work with several families, single mother families.
It's fun and exciting and hard, but not, and sometimes overwhelming, but not scary and uncertain.
There's a peace knowing that we are following God and the comfort that that kind of shelter provides.
Another key inspiration, the book of James, which says pure religion, according to God, is to care for orphans and widows. Church members are committed to taking care of every foster child in their county. Jean and Benita Bussell adopted twin boys.
Just like our own story in salvation, how God takes us, gives us a new name, and gives us a hope that we wouldn't have had without Him. He's done that for Evan and Neil.
Church members Jake and Blair Kelly have 2 foster children. Jake says the radical experiment is bringing about racial healing as well.
Our children are African American, and I was raised in an all-white city in rural Alabama. And there are days, I'll go days without thinking that my child is black. And people will give us looks sometimes at the mall, and sometimes I wonder, what are you looking at? But then I realize, well, we don't look like everyone else, and we do kind of draw a crowd.
The radical experiment isn't just about reaching Birmingham. Pastor Platt also encourages his congregation to give about 2% of their time each year, or around 1 week, to serving in a different context. For many, that means an overseas missions trip in places like Sudan and India.
It was the first time that we had ever seen children who were dying of diarrhea. They took us about a mile down a dirt path to a cesspool, and they said, this is where we get water.
Going radical for church member Spencer Sutton has meant starting the nonprofit organization Never Thirst.
God told us pretty clearly that the way we're going to encourage and support the local church in difficult areas is through clean water.
It's just really refreshing that we don't need the biggest and the best. We can use our resources in a way to further the kingdom, and that's just been amazing to see the body of Christ come to live that out.
Regent University professor Dr. James Flynn welcomes this move by the younger generation, but he cautions against imbalance.
We could begin to emphasize the works. It could become a social gospel. It could become all about the works rather than about the gospel itself. But God's just going to have to take these young champions and give them wisdom on how to lead and to guide the movement.
When Pastor Platt began preaching on going radical, some members left the church. Now he says there are more people at the church than when he started. In addition, numerous churches around the world have expressed interest in starting the radical experiment with their congregations. Mark Martin, CBN News, Birmingham, Alabama.
Up Up next, meet an unusual set of twins and why they were born in different years.
The doctor came in. I was still waking up from anesthesia. He leaned over my bed and he said, "Laura, you have cancer." And he walked out of the room. The first thought is, what's going to happen to my children?
It's pretty rare for a person as young as me to get Hodgkin's disease. You would think, am I going to be here next year? Am I going to be able to spend more time with my family? And that was really hard.
The doctor says I would like to have his wife, his pastor, and his two best friends present. Then you know you're about to receive really bad news. There was very little hope given to us.
I just wanted this cancer out of me. I wanted to take care of it and move on.
We saw an ad on TV for Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And when I called them, I was very surprised that they were so quick to help us.
The second that we walked through the door, I knew that was the place that I wanted to be. If it wasn't for their kindness and giving, it would be unbearable to be able to go through something like that. And I honestly don't know how people who don't get that are able to handle it.
We were looking for medical care that would help us fight cancer, not manage it, but to actually fight it and beat it. And that's what we found.
Most people thought that that was a death sentence. I knew that I wanted to fight this. I knew I wasn't going to let that happen to me.
If you're a winner and you're a fighter and you're strong, you're going to stay that way. Your mental makeup, your attitude that you've taken your whole life with you, you're going to keep that attitude.
I said, let's just do it, and let me go on with my life.
Call now and we'll send you this free DVD that shows you how the most compassionate group of people anywhere puts you at the center of everything we do. Advanced medical treatment combined with unique supportive therapies give you treatment options you may not even know exist.
Cancer Treatment Centers of America is the way of the future. Patients are now taking control of their own healthcare destiny.
I truly wondered when he had cancer if I would ever get him back. Thanks to Cancer Treatment Centers of America, I have my husband back.
A pair of twins born in Illinois over New Year's were delivered within seconds of each other, but in different years.
Amazing. And the decision was made on purpose. The timing of the deliveries was actually a choice offered by the doctor to give the twins distinctive birthdays.
Madison was born on 2010 and Aiden was born on 2011 at 11:59 and at midnight. Definitely worth the wait. It's hard to think that these two were in my tummy not even 24 hours ago.
I don't think it really will, for a couple days till we go home and all that, but yeah, it's not very real to me yet anyway. We're blessed.
They are blessed indeed. Originally, the couple scheduled a cesarean section to avoid complications, but when the possibility of having the babies born in separate years came up, the parents decided to take advantage of this rare opportunity.
A skillful
surgeon, to be able to
to be able to do that.
And that baby obviously obeyed and stayed in there. I don't know how you plan something like that.
Yeah.
But that's all for this edition of NewsWatch.
Remember, you can email us your comments and questions at newswatch@cbn.com. We hope you'll join us next time.